Hello and welcome to the Meet Mark podcast, and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about planning. In that regard, I mean planning for next year, not for next week or next month. And my feeling on time is always that it moves too fast or too slow. And that being that just when I want it to slow down, it seems the fastest. And other times when I want to move fast, it seems like it's slowed down for me. And it'll drive me crazy. Well, here we're going to talk about next year, and it's October, towards the end of October, and your time is typically moving very fast because we're coming in on the end of the year. And we have a million things to get done. We're watching everything. Everybody has demands, etc. But it's best to slow that thing down a little bit, and let's talk about next year. And in that end, I want to talk about three subjects. I want to talk about the year end. I want to talk about next year, what we're going to experience with sales and costs. And I want to talk about time commitments. So let's start with the year end. Being that we're in the middle of, late October, in all likelihood, we have a pretty good feel for how this year's going to come in. Typically, we know relatively well what our sales are going to be. And we may have hopes that it's going to jump up, but let's say we know historically, or we have a feeling, just a gut feeling, where we're going to bring in this year in sales. The same is true with our costs. Commonly, our costs are pretty well known, at least month to month, and we could say, here's where we're going to be at the end of the year. So now we have sales, and if we assume that's A, and we have our cost, which we'll call B, well, then we take A minus B and we have C, what we're going to make. Hopefully that number makes you happy. Doesn't always do that, but rather have a sense for it now than have it come up and smash you in the face at the end of the year. At which time, with those basic assumptions, we can look at next year. And most of us have a sense for what does the subsequent year have in store. In some markets, it's speeding up so fast, all you know is, I have to get more people, we're going to grow really fast. Okay, that's great. Other markets are not so, they can be cyclical. That's something that you as a business owner may know, I can't comment. My experience is with generally a commodity-like market, where we grew, in the neighborhood of 6 to 7%. So if I'm looking at next year, the likelihood is I'm going to get about that much. If I say, I'm going to grow 20%, I would say, well, wait a minute. That means the market's going to grow fast. Well, it doesn't grow fast. So you're going to take all that extra percentage from somebody else. How? For me, that's no easy choice, no easy win. Because the next guy or gal over that you're competing against is fighting equally as hard not to give it up. So let's assume you're not going to blow the doors out of what the normal market growth is. And you put a number in there. Here's what I think my sales are going to be. Then we have to take a look at some of the critical costs. For my business, it was people. And who were the critical players? And what am I going to do with the people that are just absolutely necessary? What I'd call my general overhead, as opposed to managers and the superstars, who we're going to have to talk about separately. But we're going to have to take a look at what do we think those costs are going to be. And if you were, again, take the cost of living, whatever it may be at a given time, and add that. Next question is, are we going to hire people? And if we're going to hire people, how many? What do you pay for them? So on and so forth. You may at the same time want to look at any debt level you have, obligations you have that are financial obligations that can't be avoided. Sometimes we have capital investment we have to make, any one of a variety of things. We're not trying to be perfect here. We're just trying to grab a relatively good number. And with that, we have sales, which again is A. We have roughly our overhead, which is B. And then we have C, our profit. So thus far, we've touched on year end and a rough look at next year. Okay, now let's look at our time commitments. because time can get chewed up quite quickly. As I mentioned, is it too fast? Is it too slow? Well, the reality is more times than not, it's too fast and you have more to do than you wanted. So I try to look at big blocks of time. For us, getting out and seeing customers was critical, and it was critical that I participate in some of that. So I would block out 4 to 5 weeks and say, one way or another, I'm going to have to give these people away. I'm going to have to give this time away, pardon me. So I take a big calendar and I just pick 4 or 5 weeks and put them down. May not be perfect, but what the heck? It's a sign of, it gives me a sign of my time commitments. Second, I like to look at vacation with my family and with my children. I do that because that's really, I like it. And it's very important not to let that fall to the bottom. You want to take care of these things. I do. I want to enjoy time with my wife. I want to enjoy time with my children. I want to go to sporting events, maybe go to tournaments with them. And I need to take a look at that. And many times at this point, October, you have a feel for next year with what those obligations are. Get them put in so they don't become something that gets pushed aside with all the other hecticness in the business life. Do you have to visit vendors? For me, I had to go overseas, or somebody at our company had to go overseas, and many times I carried the brunt of that when it came to vendor evaluations or potentially looking at new vendors. So that would be a couple weeks per visit. I might go twice a year, on rare occasion 3 times a year. So we're chewing up some time now. And if we start plugging this into our calendar, we're getting busy. Next up we got trade shows. For my business, we did 13 trade shows a year. Well, as you can imagine, if I put in 13 trade shows, well, gosh, I don't barely have time to, tie my shoes and have lunch by the time I have all that put in. So for me, I had to pick the critical ones. And once again, customers are important in my business. They want to meet owners. They want to sit down and see you and connect as a small business with the person running it. Whether you be gregarious like me or not so, it really doesn't matter. They just want to meet you and know who you are. So, in a nutshell, when it comes to planning for next year, I talk about what do you think the year end is going to be? I talk about let's look at what next year is going to be from a financial perspective and what's our time commitments for next year. And I think that wraps up the big stuff. I'm sure I missed a few. But I hope that helps you some. It helped me. It's the way I did it. And thank you for taking the time to listen. Have a nice day.